Velzard had originally approached Guy with the goal of testing him. She is jealous of Guy, who is recognized by his brother, Valdemava. As the years passed, little by little, just a tiny bit, she began to find things enjoyable. In a way, that was only natural. The one managing the deserted Heavenly Star Palace was not Feldway, but rather Velzard. She'll always be alone. Without a shadow of a doubt, the current situation is filled with a sense of duty. That's why living with Guy is so new to her. If things continue like this, she feels like she might lose sight of her purpose. No, actually, there was no need to worry in the first place. At the regularly visited Heavenly Star Palace, Velzard took the time to reflect on her own hardcore. To ensure she would never forget her original intentions, she utilized the newly awakened King of Envy, Leviathan and King of Patience, Gabriel, to freeze her hardcore solid. And so, Velzard sealed away her emotions, as if abandoning all hesitation. And now, Velzard was in ecstasy. The situation she'd always wished for filled her heart with euphoria. That's what Velzard had always wished for. This time, she would beat down Guy, who had become serious. And she would prove that she was the strongest. Velzard thought that if she did that, Guy would recognize her as well. Why does she have to beat Guy? The questioning voice rose up somewhere in her heart, but she kept quiet. She closed her heart tighter and tighter, so that she wouldn't have to ask that question. On the surface, she smiled, and a blizzard was always blowing on Velzard's insides. Now is the time to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Whispering to Velzard was Twilight, who was cooperating with her. By completely informing her of his own core, he's transformed into the very embodiment of power. Recently, it seems that a whirlwind of new information and facts has come to light. Twilight, while letting out a delighted cry, has been meticulously examining these details. As a result, he has undergone a rapid evolution. Now, it seems that they have transcended even the spiritual entity known as the Manas. Pseudo-dragon form is also one of them, which possessed unparalleled power. However, it was originally meant to be fully utilized only when paired with Velzard. The best part was the strategy of using the trump card, pseudo-dragon form, after getting into a stalemate with Guy. It can't be helped. Guy doesn't let his guard down. For dozens of hours, she had been watching for an opening, but not the slightest opportunity presented itself. From beginning to end, Guy never let his guard down. On the contrary, he seemed convinced that Velzard was hiding something. That was why Velzard had assumed that strategy would fail. She hadn't expected Testarossa to get in my way, but the situation was still the same. Pretty much. Still, the White Queen Testarossa is pretty good. She can control the extremely dangerous void as she pleases. Right? Since it's still covering the surface of my body, you can't use the pseudo-dragon form either. As a matter of fact, Velzard was wrapped in a shining white darkness. It's not that she can't shake this off, but it's dangerous to do it in front of Guy. Voids had the property of absorbing energy, so if Velzard released her magic, she could probably wipe it out. However, she didn't think that would be the end of it. She could see that if she was summoned to the void again, it would end in nothing more than a waste of time. It really is a troublesome move. Emission-type abilities are completely useless, right? If the power was just reduced, that will be one thing, but since the moment of firing is so obvious, dodging becomes effortless. That's Twilight for you. His analytical abilities are impressive. The pseudo-personality he sent out was completely defeated by Testarossa, but as an advisor, he couldn't ask for more. Testarossa's goal was to contain Twilight, which meant she'd lost one of her trump cards to Guy. She had no choice but to abandon her original plan at this point, and she should have entered a head-on rock-paper-scissors match. As far as I'm concerned, it's a happy situation. Twilight didn't respond to this. It would be one thing if they were aiming for a certain victory, but it was because Velzard's goal was different. You can defeat Guy and do whatever you want. Yes, I'll do that. Velzard smiled deepened to a grand extent. The next moment, Velzard unleashed her desire. She hadn't held back at all, but she'd still protected the last line. But now, she'd been given up her reasoning in order to obtain Guy. Guy, to me, you were everything. I've always been watching you. Only you. And yet, why wouldn't you look at me? Look at me. Just look at me. It was Velzard's heartfelt cry. It was a selfish and capricious, yet above all, pure desire. Guy stood still in midair, keeping his distance from Velzard, but he sensed danger and flew backwards. Just in the nick of time. Back where he came from, the violent ice and snow was blowing wildly. With the force of the purple lightning, Velzard's onslaught began. Having abandoned her plan, Velzard was a real threat. Even among the strongest dragon species, Velzard was on another level. As a being second only to the Star King dragon Veldanava, it had a bottomless power. The vast amount of magical energy released became a wave and rage, trying to blow away Testarossa's voids. This wasn't Velzard's intention. It was merely an act of intimidation accompanied by a heightened will to fight. And yet, it was effective. This is no joke. It's going to cost you dearly, Guy. And then, Testarossa, who was about to join within Moss's barrier, cursed in frustration. Even so, without giving up, she skillfully manipulates the void and adeptly channels Velzard's magical power. The finesse of her technique reaches the realm of art, and even Rain, who is always competing with her, quickly admits defeat, saying, "It's impossible." It was enough to make even Guy admit it. Thank you, Testarossa. If Twilight came out here, it would be a pain, and Guy's victory would be far away. Guy was truly glad Testarossa had come. Even Testarossa didn't have the composure to take on another opponent. It was her first move, so she was able to get through, but if it was their second time, they'd probably take countermeasures against her. Before that, the best thing to do is to ignore enemies that keep coming back, no matter how many times you defeat them. That was one of the lessons she learned through intense training in the labyrinth of Amidst. Anyone who tried to stop Velzard now would be kicked away in an instant. Not even Testarossa could do that. They weren't at a level where anything would happen if they tried to come up with a plan, and discussions wouldn't get through. She's out of options. There was only one person who could face Velzard now that it had come to this. Not even one hand. No, on the contrary. Even Velzard-sama and Velgrand-sama might not be able to do it. The only ones who can be a match for them are those of equal standing, the dragon species, or perhaps only Guy. It seems like Rimuru-sama would be able to do something about it, but just thinking that way makes me feel so useless. Testarossa tried to control herself, but no one would blame her for that. Rimuru wasn't here, so either way, they had to do something on their own. We'll just have to leave it to Guy. Guy, who had the potential to stop Velzard, was entrusted with all of her remaining hope. Testarossa had finally made it to the barrier. The interior of Moss's barrier had become comfortable in anticipation of Testarossa joining them. After all, Moss had used this opportunity to earn points and adjust the temperature. There was a warmth as warm as the spring sun, and even Saka, who had been freezing, was taking a breather. Not only that, Moss had even created a chair with material creation. There was no way they could sit on the frozen ground, so Moss and the others had been standing the whole time. However, there was no way they could let Testarossa do the same. It's second rate to act after being ordered to. First rate is to prepare everything beforehand so as not to offend your master. Moss faithfully protects that theory and serves Testarossa. Moss-kun, why didn't you leave it like this in the first place? While shamelessly sitting down on the chair, Rain complained. The way she emphasized you was quite sarcastic. Rain is sensitive to the cold, so she had been enduring it until now. She had enough common sense to understand that there was no point in wishing for something she didn't have, so she stayed quiet. However, seeing that chairs were prepared for Misery, Rain, and Saka as well, it was undoubtedly clear that they still had reserves to spare. From Rain's point of view, she wanted to say, if you can, do it from the start. She wanted to question why Testarossa was the only one getting preferential treatment. I wonder what she's talking about. Where's Rain? Testarossa, elegantly seated in the chair prepared for her, asked in exasperation. It was Misery who answered this. I'm sorry, Testarossa. Rain's doing her best, so it looks like she's stressed out a little. Misery, don't you think you're spoiling her too much? That's not true. Telling a kid who's already trying their best to do their best might just pressure them and have the opposite effect, but for a kid who's not putting in much effort, a little push might be just what they need, don't you think? What are you trying to say? Testarossa was genuinely exasperated at Misery, who really didn't seem to understand. Rain is doing her best, isn't she? Huh? Are you seriously saying that? Of course, isn't it obvious? Aren't you being looked down upon by Guy? That might be the case, but it's probably because my abilities aren't up to par yet. Testarossa thought that wasn't it, but she hesitated to say it out loud. She'd sympathize with Misery a little. The conversation ended, and the inside of the barrier went quiet. Outside, the battle between Guy and Velzard was intensifying, and without a topic of conversation, the tension would only continue to rise. That said, it was best to avoid careless topics. By the way, Moss has erased his presence like air. They were sitting side by side as if hiding from Saka, silently doing their own work with faces like it had nothing to do with them. Hearing his name come up in a conversation between the primordials is incredibly stressful. The best thing to do is to let it go in one ear and out the other, while hoping they don't mention him any further. Look at Moss. He's grown up to be quite capable thanks to me. Give me a break, Moss thought. If I were to fail, you'd get so angry that you'd erase my existence, wouldn't you? It's not something as cute as just provoking someone. The reality is that those who were placed under the immense pressure of never allowing failure, and who were able to endure it, are the ones who survive. Even if it's spoken as if it's their own accomplishment, well, it would be easier if I could say that, but Moss kept his mouth shut like a clam, and silently showed with his attitude that as Testarossa-sama said. Well, that's true. If I look at Moss, I admit that you're competent in terms of education, but, you know. Rain is also a child who can do it if given the chance, right? Though she was made to cry, she ended up tying with you, didn't she? When was that supposed to happen? Testarossa looked dubious. It wasn't Misery who responded to this, but Rain, who had been on the topic. There's no need to talk about the past anymore. More importantly, right now, isn't it more important to think about how we can make Gisama's victory certain? She could see through her true desire to gloss over the inconvenient story. Changing the subject so blatantly is a surprisingly underhanded strategy. Sako whispers to herself. The opponent is Moss. Could you please keep quiet? At least stop dragging me into this. And it was Moss, looking off into the distance like she wanted to cry. Rain was trembling. I wonder why. I feel like my position has become very dangerous. You reap what you sow. However, Rain was the type to seek the cause from others, so she didn't consider herself to be at fault. As soon as she understood that deception wouldn't work this time either, she decided to make my next move. In other words, another change of topic. Rain declared, feeling full. It can't be helped, it's for victory. Why don't I go and help Gisama? What do you think? Rain declared. Testarossa snorted when she heard that. And then. If you want to die, I won't stop you. You'll be killed in an instant, and you'll only end up providing us with laughter. And, well, she fanned Rain with a harsh opinion, as if she was putting her words from earlier into practice. Sako restrained herself as if to say, I don't have the right to speak, but she agreed with Testarossa. Moss, too. There's no mistaking it, since it's the Lord's idea. Considering the situation, Rain's words are laughable. Even Rain was at the top of the mountain that belonged to one of the strongest, but against the top, there was too much difference. Anyone would understand that Testarossa's opinion was correct. Even Misery couldn't defend Rain. Well, that's true. Even if we go, we'll only get in Gisama's way, so let's do what we can, okay? While soothing Rain with those words, she smoothly changed the topic by saying, by the way, I also sent my subordinates toward Rebelios. Rain's eyes welled up with tears now that she'd seen through her shoulders, but she quickly switched gears and said, now that I think about it, it's cold outside, isn't it? The speed at which she recovered was one of Rain's good points. My subordinates, along with Rain, asked Velzard to take them to Rebelios. It's tough on our side too, but we need them to do their best on the other side as well. That's true. Even if we bring Velzard back to her senses, if the world is destroyed, all our efforts would be meaningless. In that regard, let's place our hopes on Luminous Sama, who is already there on site. Let's change the subject like that. So, did you find Carrera and the others? Testarossa asked Moss. It was a form of questioning, but the only answer she was looking for was affirmation. Moss understood that too, so he nodded without hesitation. Ah, yes. Then that's fine. They're under this snow, aren't they? Exactly. Moss declared without hesitation. They had moved little by little, searching for traces, and had reached the top of the ice statues of Carrera and the others. The snow and ice of Velzard had piled up several meters, and no ice statues could be seen in the field of view. However, without a doubt, there were reactions from Carrera and the others directly beneath the point where the barrier was set. Milm's subordinates' reactions were also frozen a short distance away. There were no life signs, but he wasn't worried about this. Since they were instantly frozen by Velzard Sama's authority, resurrection should be easy in contrast. If the soul were to disappear, resurrection would be impossible, but in the current situation, there was no need to worry about that. Therefore, Moss is not concerned about that point. Testarossa was the same. The only forces that would work here would be Carrera and Obera. Powerful beings like Carrion, Free, and Midray, who are million-class warriors. While they are a step below, Esprit and the three Beast Warriors are also rare and formidable forces, but they don't hold up against Guy and Velzard. It was safer to save the rescue for later. Even so, as far as Testarossa was concerned, she wanted to revive Carrera in place of her exhausted self. And while they're at it, if they can revive Obera, everything will be fine. She still hadn't made any predictions until the end of the battle in the White World. That's why she needed to secure as many troops as possible. Hurry up and dig it out. As you wish. As far as Moss was concerned, he really wanted to argue that it was that reckless, but his only reply was approval. He lamented that he couldn't even move it anyway, but at Testarossa's behest, he began the optimal course of action.